All right, so let's talk about automation a bit. And I will do this by showing you how to pan a sound from one side to the other over the course of a certain amount of time. So what is automation? So automation allows you to control the shape of various parameters over time. You could do this in a more kind of gradual way. You can do it in a very fixed kind of way. You could do this in a very repetitive way. So what is a parameter? Something like volume, panning. What is panning? Panning is which direction the sound comes out of. So if you're listening out of two speakers, which most people do, or like headphones, is it sound all the way to the right? Is it sound all the way to the left? Is it in the middle? Is it somewhere in between, etc.? So that's what we're going to do. So I'm going to insert a little sample, and which I will share with you, and it's called arms mono. And I have here my project set to 120 BPMs for 4. This is the default. I'm going to make this a little bigger. Now if I play this back,
and it has arms,
you'll hear that it comes out of the middle. Okay? Now if I wanted this to come out of the right, I could do this simply by changing, by turning the pan knob all the way to the right. And now it comes out all the way to the right. Or I could do the opposite and go all the way to the left. And I could do this
and it has arms
all the way, something in between. It could be a little bit, maybe 55% to the left, etc. If you double click, by the way, it brings it back to the center. So that's completely fine if you don't want it to move. So if I have a certain instrumental setup, let's say I have a string quartet, I might put the cello on one side. And if I recorded the individual instruments separately, I can recreate a sort of sense of the space by putting one instrument a little bit to the one side, a little bit all the way to the other. It actually makes for a much clearer sound rather than having everything come out of the center. So how might you go about this? So let's see. What I'm going to do is I'm going to loop this. Okay, let's double check that our loop works nice
and
and
it has
neatly.
arms, and it has arms.
Good. Okay, our loop works fine. And what I'm going to do is what I want to do is I want this sound every time that it repeats to come out of either the left or the right and alternate. So the way to do this, you could do a couple different ways. The longer way to do it would be to create 2 tracks. So like I could duplicate this track, and then I could cut out this file. So I guess in that case, the best way to do it would not be to loop. But let's say that I repeated these a bunch of times. And then I could cut this one out, and I could cut that one out, cut this one out, cut that one out, So now, and I could say, okay, this one only comes out of the right, this one only comes out of the left. So every time when this one plays, it'll come out of the left. When this one plays, it'll come out of the right, and it'll just bounce around. It works. I'll prove it to you.
Here. And it has arms, and it has arms, and it has arms, and it has arms.
Okay, probably not the most effective way to do it, but it works. But normally, you would do this using envelopes. So what is an envelope? We already talked about it. How do you get an envelope to show in Reaper? You press trim. And now over here, you can choose which envelope you want. In this case, we're going with pan. So we want it to be visible. And now, you could actually drag this line up and down, and it would effectively do the same thing that you would do by doing this. So if I move it around, then when it starts to play,
and it has arms. And
it'll basically, if I go all the way down, it'll be all the way to the right. If I go all the way up, it'll go all the way to the left, etc. But the advantage with this is that I can now change it over time. And you can do this suddenly, or you could do it gradually. So for example, if I wanted to do it gradually, so that after 4 repetitions, it starts all the way to the right, and then it goes all the way to the left, I can create a new point. So you could just press shift and then click here at the end, and then there's a little point. Now if you hover over it, you get a little kind of 4-sided arrow of some kind, and you can now drag it all the way up. So this is now changing over time. Now in this case, what's changing is the pan, in other words, the position in space. But what this could be is volume. You could have it change the volume over time. So it starts really quiet, gets really loud, starts really loud, gets really quiet, etc. So you can create, there's no limit to how much you could do. And it doesn't even have to be a straight line. But so listen to what it sounds like now.
And it has arms.
Starts on the right and gradually goes to the left. Okay? Now you could also do this in a kind of a freer way by using a pencil shape. So let's take it back to the middle. Actually, let's go all the way back to the middle. There. So now it's back in the middle. And now what I could do is instead of doing shift, I could do command. And now I could literally draw a random shape. And now it's going to kind of go up to the right, kind of go to the left,
and it has arms, and it has arms, and it has arms, and it has arms.
And you could actually take each of these points and bring them down individually or as a whole. You could say, oh, I want that to be a little bit more extreme up here and over there, etc.
And it has arms,
you know,
and it has arms.
That kind of thing. Now, this is all perfectly well and good, but let's say that we want exactly the same thing that we did before. Then we would have to work a little bit harder because we would have to, here up to this point, say go to 0. So let's say, so to 0, to all the way to the left. And then over here, we create a point. And now we take that point and we put it here. Sorry, I'm having a hard time seeing. So shift, create a point, then we create another point. I'll just create it right here. And then I'm going to take that, I'm going to drag it all the way here. And now it's all the way to the left. And I'm going to create another point, etc. And then I create another point over here. And then you just drag it down. Anyway, so you basically create this kind of square shape where you go all the way down to the left, all the way up to the right, all the way down to the left, all the way up to the right. Or you could do this for a bit, and then from this point, you say, oh, and now it's going to go gradually. So now it's going to start all the way to the left, suddenly go all the way to the right, suddenly go all the way to the left again, and then gradually go back to the right. So take a listen.
And it has arms, and it
left,
has arms,
right, and gradually
and it has arms, and it has arms,
to the right.
and it
Okay?
has arms.
So it kind of depends on what you're trying to do. There isn't necessarily one exact way to do it. And so the last thing I want to show you is how to do the same thing we did earlier with kind of a built-in feature that Reaper has. It's kind of more advanced, but why not? All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to add one more repetition so that we have an even number. And then I'm going to make sure that all of this is selected. And then I'm going to right click over here where I will choose under automation items, insert new automation item. And then you can either right click again and go to properties, or you can double click it. And here we will choose square wave. So what we're doing is we're adding an LFO shape. What is an LFO? An LFO is a low frequency oscillator. So this allows us to select a shape and have it repeat over and over and over. Now, it's not an infinite number of shapes, but there's some common basic ones like a saw, a triangle, sine, and so the one I'm choosing is square because it best represents what we did before, which was completely one way, completely the other way. So it kind of goes from one extreme to the other. Actually, I should go back there one more time. Let me go to properties again. And so we have square, and what we want it to do is we want it to repeat 3 times because it goes all the way up, all the way down. So that's 1 cycle, 2 cycles, 3 cycles. So the reason I had to add one more repetition is that if we have less, it won't be able to do full cycles at this tempo. So it's, well, anyway, so that's what that is. And so now we've effectively created still just an automation, but this is more dynamic. So it allows us to change. Let's say we decided instead of having the panning change every repetition, we maybe want to change it every 2 or every half. We could change that much more rapidly here than having to go manually and do it that way. So take a listen.
And it has arms, and it has arms, and it has arms, and it has arms.
So it's the same. So it's the same thing, except now it's kind of an automated thing. And we can also experiment with different shapes. Instead of it being square, we could do sine, so now it kind of goes back and forth, but kind of gradually moves back and forth. You could try triangle, and it more of a slides up and down. And saw, so it kind of dips quickly, gradual, and then dips all the way down, and then gradual again. And then parametric is kind of like a curvy shape. So again, doing this by hand would be basically impossible. So So it's got so it's really nice, and not to mention, of course, it doesn't have to be just panning. It could be volume changes. We could add additional envelopes for other things. So for example, if I go back to trim, I can add another envelope for volume, and I could do a similar thing here where the volume matches the where the sound is going or not. It could have the volume get very subtly, carefully louder. I might as well show you. Why don't I show you? Let me go back to my square here. So I have now my sound. It changes from left to right, and I want my volume, let's say, to go from 0, because in this case the envelope indicates no volume there, and then all the way here will be full volume. So I'm going to go to Shift, and I'm going to add a point. So what this means is that the volume will get louder gradually while the panning changes left to right. Okay, here goes. Yeah, so I started a little too extreme. You can't even hear it at the beginning, so we can maybe bring it up a little bit so that we actually have some volume. We can go a little bit more. There we go.
And it has arms. And it has arms. And it has arms.
Okay, so you can imagine, you know, you hear this stuff in music all the time, where maybe there's like a filter, like a sound gets brighter gradually. This is how all this is done. Okay, so hope it's helpful.